Welcome to Liberty Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we explore how to build freedom through the entrepreneurial process. Our goal is to provide you with the tools and mindset needed to create your lifestyle of independence and flexibility. I'm your host, Ash Whitener, and this is Episode 1, Candy, Clothing, and Alternative Currencies, with our guest Stephen Macaskill, CEO and founder of Amagi Metals. Please follow us on Twitter at Liberty E Podcast and Facebook/Liberty Entrepreneurs. Show notes are found on the website and on YouTube. Enjoy the show. With me today is Stephen Macaskill, founder of precious metals company Amagi Metals. Stephen has over a decade of experience in precious metals, economics, and financial markets. He recently sold Amagi Metals, which was generating over $10 million in sales per year and $20 million in total Bitcoin transactions. He has made presentations across the U.S. on topics such as precious metals, Bitcoin, and individual liberty, including Money 2020, Liberty on the Rocks, and for the Foundation for Economic Education's annual retreat. He loves promoting the ideas of individual liberty and free markets any chance he gets. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ash. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, man. So give us a little bit of background on you, and when did you first become an entrepreneur?
Well, I was born in South Africa, and a lot of my family there own their own businesses, and they have an entrepreneurial spirit. So it was definitely in my blood, and my family definitely promoted it to me. So it was very easy or natural for me to become a business owner. I started my first entrepreneurial adventure, as I call it, in 4th or 5th grade, and with the help of my parents. What I used to do was buy candy bulk, and I used to go to the school, and I would sell it individually. And, you know, as a 4th or 5th grader, I was bringing anywhere between $20 to $60 a day,
wow.
Which, you know, back then.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. When you're that young, it was a lot of money. Also gave me my first perceptions of regulations. My business was quickly shut down by the administrators. Sadly, to my loss, I was unable to continue pursuing my business because the school didn't want anything to do with it.
That's interesting because that's my first entrepreneurial experience as well, selling candy to my peers in elementary school, and I was shut down very quickly.
Yeah, it's awful. And I'm sure for you, they said that I wasn't able to make a profit, that I needed to ask them for permission, and I needed to get the proper licensing. My parents were infuriated because, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was providing value, and I was being very creative in doing so, and it was shut down.
Yeah. So after the candy selling, what was your next type of entrepreneurial experience? I mean, you had a failed business selling candy, and you picked up, and what was your next opportunity?
Yeah, so my next opportunity was a clothing line. It was called Amagi Clothing, and the idea was to promote the ideas of individual liberty in popular culture. I think that for those ideas to spread like wildfire, they should be promoted more in popular culture rather than through something like the political process.
So you had a clothing line that was appealing, or your audience was liberty-minded people?
Yeah, and I didn't really want my audience to specifically be libertarians or liberty-minded people because I wanted to have messages that many people of many different spectrums could relate to.
Right, so it was your platform to try to get these ideas out there and see who they resonated with, and you use clothing to do that.
Exactly.
That's very interesting. And what year was that?
That was 2008, 2009.
Okay. So this would be what you would say is your first real entrepreneurial experience.
Yes. Oh yeah. It was.
And so tell us a bit about how you started it, and like what ideas you had in your head, and like what setbacks you may have had, or just some of the very beginnings of this clothing line.
Sure. Well, the idea popped into my head a few years before when I was shopping at the mall, and actually I was at Express, and I saw a really cool hoodie that had a Liberty image or logo on it. And it really resonated with me because people love to shop. They love, especially in the United States, although it's really important to save. If you look at the reality, a lot of us are consumers. So I have always had a passion of promoting individual liberty. Initially, I was looking at ways that I could contribute. And I thought, well, why don't I start a nonprofit? Mm-hmm. But of course, I wasn't very interested. There were a lot of other organizations that, nonprofits out there. And I wanted to find a way to provide value rather than go around asking people for money. Mm-hmm. So, it was a very difficult process because, as any business owner might know, for the first time, you don't really know exactly what the first step should be. For me, my first step was buying a website, getting a domain name where, we could start creating brand identity and start working on the development of the clothes and the ideas for each piece of clothing.
Was there anything at the beginning where you just feared, something that came up or, something that happened and you didn't know what to do, and it really made you question this entrepreneurial experience? Because I know that a lot of people are afraid to start a business because we're not really taught how to start businesses, right? This is something that we learn after our quote education or after our schooling, Is there anything that you can help the audience hear about one area that maybe, you bumped up against a wall, or you were really concerned, or you failed at something, or then you were able to push through?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I was scared about almost everything. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is because I just didn't know if I was doing it right. Mm-hmm. And I had very little work experience at the time, but also, worrying about whether I received the right licensing. At the time, I didn't have enough money to hire a lawyer and ask for all their expertise. I had to do a lot of learning and research myself. But over time, and it just takes practice. I think that there aren't really right or wrong decisions that you'll make in your business, at least in the beginning. Obviously, you'll make mistakes and you'll learn from those mistakes. But as long as you keep making those mistakes, keep making those decisions,
and learning from that.
Yeah. Over time, you will learn what is the right decision and the wrong decision. However, it's not something that, you should be afraid of. I would say that, any entrepreneur you talk to who started a business for the first time and they told you that they knew what they were doing, I can tell you that they were lying, because it's different every time. It's just a different circumstance or different needs, and there are different challenges every time. So Stephen, sticking with the Amagi name, you opened up a gold and silver and precious metals company called Amagi Metals. When did you start that, and tell us how that idea started? Yeah, well, the company was called Metals for You, and it was a hobby business that my friend in college owned, and it paid for his way through college. And unfortunately for him, he wanted to go into banking. So he wanted to either shut down the business or sell it. And I went to school for financial economics. I had a very strong understanding of sound money and financial responsibility. And I saw a very big opportunity to get into the precious metals industry.
And what year was that?
That was in late 2009.
Okay.
So I realized I did make quite a bit of money from Amagi clothing, but after a time I realized I'm colorblind. I don't really have a very good fashion sense. I think I can make a bigger impact if I go more into this industry of promoting sound money. Mm-hmm. So I saw an enormous opportunity with his business, and so I liquidated Amagi clothing. And I used my profits to buy Amagi Metals, and I pretty much dedicated my entire time to the new company.
Right. And this was in 2009, which was a very exciting time for precious metals as well.
Yeah. It was very exciting. The business at the time was very small. It focused primarily on fractional gold and silver. Mm-hmm. That's, of course, where the highest margins were. Mm-hmm. We definitely bootstrapped the business. So we started from the ground up with our own capital and our own money, and every penny we made, we just reinvested into inventory. And from there, we were just selling on eBay, and we expanded to our own websites, and went from doing something like $100,000 in sales a year to over 10 million. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was definitely a ground up business from working in an apartment, having the entire business in one apartment to having an office with several employees. So,
yeah. So speaking of employees, I know that delegating tasks to employees and finding the right employees, this is very delicate and very difficult for an entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur tends to want to do everything himself.
Yes.
Because, the old saying, if you want it done right, do it yourself.
Yeah.
So can you tell the audience a bit about how are you able to delegate, or what you look for when you're hiring someone, or just how you think you're going to get a solid employee?
Yeah, well, that was great learning experience for me, learning how to delegate. And it's something that takes practice with everything else. And it's very difficult at first to give up the reins of a part of your business. As you said, you always think that you can do everything better. Mm-hmm. And you probably know that you can, but at some point, you don't have enough resources to do everything. And it's better for you to focus on the things that you do best. Right. So, for me, it came down to trying to provide guidance and telling the employees what your end result is, or what the end result that you want, and have them find the ways that they can get to those end results. And for you, you're helping provide the tools and maybe support to help them get there. But you don't want to give them or tell them exactly how to do every single thing, the entire system or the entire process, because what you're really looking for are the end results. And there may be innovations that the employee can do that you're not even aware of, where the results are the same or even better. Because they know how to do it more efficiently.
Yeah, and they can specialize. Like, I am not a web designer, and I have to find people to help me with my web pages and web design in general. I could spend hours and hours and hours and weeks upon weeks trying to figure out how to apply this WordPress template or get all this stuff set up. But as an entrepreneur, it's very important to recognize what your strengths and weaknesses are, and try to find out what other people's strengths and weaknesses are. On that topic, what do you think are the strengths that make a good entrepreneur?
Well, that's very. I think that there are many different strengths that entrepreneurs can have, and what I think that a big one is learning to accept failure. And I know that's a very difficult one for people to accept, but if you're never going to be successful if you don't have those 100 failures in between. As someone famous once said, success is on the other side of failure. So don't stop. If you hit a failure, the best thing you can do is learn from it. And if you don't learn from it, then obviously you aren't gaining anything out of that failure. So definitely make sure that when you have a failure, you're learning. Other strengths, I would say, are empathy. For leadership, I think it's very important to understand your customer, understand your employees, and also, of course, being able to make decisions. when you make a decision, it may not always be the right decision, but it's important that decisions are made. So it's definitely important for one to be decisive. And I think it's also important to, especially in today's age, to be able to adapt. So be able to see what's coming and be able to make those changes quickly, because we look at a lot of these businesses around today, and I think that the big ones, the ones that have these major bureaucracies, won't be around for very long because they don't have the ability to change very quickly.
Right. And that's one of the big issues right now that people are talking about Bitcoin. I know Bitcoin's not a company,
Sure.
but Bitcoin has a lot of bureaucracy now. And it's so difficult to get a change in the Bitcoin code, like especially something as large as, forking it or increasing the block size. So I definitely agree with you that the more bureaucracy that you have, it's going to weigh heavier on your business. That's why things like technological startups and companies like Uber can explode so quickly, because they're so decentralized. So Stephen, I know that you were, if not the first, one of the first precious metals companies to accept Bitcoin, and quite possibly one of the earliest businesses in general to accept Bitcoin. I believe that you started accepting Bitcoin in 2012. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And before we started accepting it, we were accepting traditional payment methods like credit card, check, wire. There was another precious metals company that accepted Bitcoin for precious metals, but they only accepted Bitcoin for precious metals. So we were one of the first traditional businesses to get into that.
Yeah, 2012. I mean, in the Bitcoin sense, that's very early. I mean, not a lot of people had even heard of Bitcoin. I mean, still nobody really has heard of Bitcoin, but even back then, that's only a couple years after its inception. So as an entrepreneur, walk me through your thinking in accepting Bitcoin and why you decided to take a risk on such a new technology.
Yeah, well, by 2012, I had heard of Bitcoin 3 or 4 times by then, and people had brought it up to me. So a big factor was that people that were important to me had continued to press me and tell me to research it. At one point, I decided, okay, I need to sit down and read what Bitcoin is all about. And ever since, it's just been a rabbit hole. Back then, my knowledge was very limited. It took me about a week to read up on it and learn about it. And still, just the basic information that I had got me really excited about it. Of course, I realized that it was an experiment. It still is, I would say. What got me really interested in it was its potential to be sound money. And that was right up my avenue of promoting and learning about sound money. So I used a company, BitPay, and they were very easy to install, very easy to process, and I didn't have to keep all my money in Bitcoins. They would be able to lock the price in and convert it for me instantly. So that safety definitely helped. However, you still see a lot of companies that have been told about Bitcoin, and yet they're still making the silly decision of not accepting it. So I think that in those cases, a lot of factors come into play, such as bureaucracy and a lack of knowledge or information.
And do you think that these companies aren't accepting Bitcoin because it's too compliance heavy, or do you think it's because they don't understand the difference between lowercase Bitcoin, the money, and just being able to use the financial rail of the capital B Bitcoin network?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's many different things. Number one thing, lack of education. There is no single word or single definition for Bitcoin. As we've seen, this week, the CFTP just announced that it's a commodity, and yet the IRS sees it as property and FinCEN sees it as money. So
right.
there a lack of education, just because of how dense the topic is huge. But I think another big factor is the bureaucracy. For a decision to be made in a lot of businesses, they require many committees, many people involved, and it takes a very long time or process for it to unfold. So, especially in these larger businesses, that's why you don't see Amazon accepting Bitcoin.
Right. So, as a small business owner like yourself, tell us how you use Bitcoin. You could quickly adapt to use Bitcoin as a potential competitive advantage over these big companies with big bureaucracies.
Yeah, well, for us, it worked by participating in the community and essentially immersing ourselves in the Bitcoin community. When we started accepting it, we didn't really get that many sales for the first 5 or 6 months. It took a little bit. And after we started accepting it, we thought, oh, well, this is cool. Just another way to accept money. However, it really started to catch on. And we did an exceptional job with the marketing. And from there, I mean, we just exploded. And so I think it's really important, specifically for the Bitcoin community, to market, because they have a lot of Bitcoins and they have a lot of Bitcoins that they want to spend. And right now there's only a finite amount of places that they can spend their Bitcoins. But if you really become part of the community, you really respond to them, you give them what they want, and they will come running.
That's great. Yeah, it's very interesting to me how you were able to see this new and budding technology that's cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and implement that very quickly and use that as a way to compete against some of the more established gold and silver brokers out there. They are going to be much more hesitant because they're going to feel that they have a lot more to lose. And, if their business is working well, the saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And for you were able to quickly act on a technology that you spent, like you said, a week studying, and you knew that it could really boost your sales and make you a much stronger competitor. And I think that's something good for everyone to hear, is how an entrepreneur doesn't have to spend a lot of money to try to improve his business. It could be something as simple as getting the scent of a new technology and spending your time doing that. Since you're in control of your time, that's the freedom that you get as an entrepreneur. You can spend it looking at a new emerging technology and how important it could be to incorporate that in your own business.
Sure. And it's actually funny that you said that, because I actually had no idea what the effect of accepting Bitcoin would have on my business. I don't know if it would be one of the biggest mistakes that I would make, or a great decision. And I think that's really important to continually experiment and try new things, because people don't always know what's going to catch on, or what's going to be very important in the future, unless you experiment and you try things that are just completely out of from left field.
Yeah. And that ties into what you were saying earlier about you're going to go out there and you're going to try and fail a lot. It's not, success is on the other side of failure.
Oh, exactly.
So I've got a question for you, Stephen. How has being an entrepreneur provided more freedom in your life and or your client's life? Because at Liberty Entrepreneurs, our goal is to center our focus on building business, and that's the way that we're able to achieve freedom, rather than fighting against something or arguing against the Federal Reserve or the government. While I understand why that's tempting, because you see them as the oppressors, it doesn't seem to be working. So how have you become more free as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, I would say that as an entrepreneur, it has given me the confidence to make decisions and do things that I would have never done before. Having a lot more freedom to take time off when I want, to go places that I want, to be able to travel a lot more, and without having to ask for permission has definitely changed my life. It's changed the way that I value different things, such as what's important to me versus what's not important to me. Things that used to be important to me really aren't as important.
By being an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Especially as we were talking earlier, being able to delegate. I have the ability to, because it's a skill. It's not something that you're born with. Because I'm a better delegator, I am able to see what's more important to me and what I should be giving less important stuff to other people to handle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that entrepreneurship does the opposite, because they're like, I've got to work 70-hour weeks now. I don't get paid for a long time because I've got to get all this capital up front and spend all my time trying to build this. And I think there's a misconception that people see having to work that much and not seeing the rewards quickly. That doesn't equate to freedom. But how I see it is you are voluntarily working for yourself and trying to build value for yourself and something that you own. And you have the ability to make those decisions. And you've got the ability to figure out how to use your finances and when and if you want to hire someone and how you can network. And, I think there's a lot more opportunity as an entrepreneur rather than someone who works a 9-to-5 desk job. Maybe they only get to take, 10, 15 days off a year. They have to be in there for certain hours every single day. As an entrepreneur, I can work a 12-hour day and then maybe I work 3-4-hour days after that.
Sure.
I have a lot more control.
Sure. And also I would actually like to add a little addendum to that as well, because I think a lot of people, so you're talking about people who work 70 or 90-hour work weeks, and I've done that, and I really enjoy doing that sometimes as well. However, I do want to make a distinct difference between technicians, so people who may start a business, but they are working in their business. So they're the baker, they're the plumber, and so they get caught up doing the day-to-day stuff rather than working on the business and expanding it more, working on the leadership and entrepreneurial skills, the delegation. And I think that there's definitely a big difference between the two, because somebody who starts as the technician and starts working in the business can definitely get caught up in that, and they won't have those freedoms. So it's really important for them to take a step back and start delegating and take more of a leadership role rather than the everyday, day-to-day operation.
Absolutely. It's one thing for an entrepreneur to start his or her business, but it's another thing to have the business sense and experience to learn when it's time to create all the workflows, hire somebody, train people, start delegating tasks out to free up your time again to maybe, sit back and relax for a while, or to push towards another business, or just to expand out your business more.
Exactly.
So what motivates you, Stephen? What gets you up in the morning? What are you truly passionate about as an entrepreneur?
Well, right now, my motivation, I think, is a lot of self-reflection and self-improvement. The reason why I say that, I've recently sold my business.
Amagi Metals.
Exactly, yes. Okay. I'm right now trying to improve myself, improve my knowledge, and also learn about what's out there. So I am very interested in decentralizing technologies, However, I think that we are going into a phase or in the next 5 or 10 years where there will be a lot of businesses raising a lot of money in this industry, and yet they're not going to be providing a lot of value. So right now I'm sitting on the sidelines and learning as much as I can and observing. But when I was running Amagi Metals, what really motivated me was wanting to help the customer, knowing that when I got to the office, when somebody bought an ounce of gold, when they were buying an ounce of silver, they were essentially creating their own financial freedom by preserving their wealth, building up a solid foundation for themselves, where when they are ready to go on vacation or ready for retirement, they're not worried about making very large sacrifices in their lives. And so for me, it was really about interacting with the customers. And that was one thing that I really enjoyed. Although I delegated pretty much the entire customer service department away, I still picked up the phone and I really enjoyed having direct contact with the customers.
Yeah, and this is the empathy that you were talking about earlier, which you said was a very important personality trait or attribute that makes a strong entrepreneur. I can definitely see that. And working in technical support and different types of support in my previous jobs before I was an entrepreneur really helped me grow to understand and appreciate that type of empathy and connecting with your clients. It's just a skill that is transferable to, as far as I know, every type of business, because a business isn't a business without a client. You have to sell either a product or a service. Well, I guess unless you're the government and you just point guns at people.
Yeah.
But okay, Stephen. So let's have a couple lightning round questions. Just a couple things that, you can take as little or as much time as you would like. So can you share a tool or a shortcut or a life hack that's helped you succeed as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, I think a really big one for me is multitasking, and that is don't do it. The reason why is it's at least what I've found is it's not very efficient. When you're driving and you're texting or reading an email and responding, you're not doing the best job that you can. I've found that my time is a lot more efficient when I can sit down and work on one task or one thing at a time rather than many different things. And I think multitasking's really big in our day and age with smartphones. However, I recommend at least doing some research, looking into it, because I think that the science shows that just focusing on one task at a time gets you completed much faster and a lot more efficient.
Yeah, it's not necessarily how much work you're getting done, but the quality of the work that you're doing.
Exactly.
So what has been a very influential or the most influential book in your life?
Wow. Well, I wouldn't know what the most influential book in my life has been, but I would say that one that was very influential to me was Anthem by Ayn Rand. Mm-hmm. And that was a book that I read in maybe middle school or high school, and that really started to put my basic philosophy together, my understanding of individual liberty. And the only reason why I would say it's not one of my most influential books, but it did have a big impact on my life, is because I got into it so early on, mm-hmm. And it was so easy to comprehend.
And can you just give a quick, 15-second summary of what Anthem is for the listeners if they're not familiar?
Yeah, Anthem is a dystopian universe at some point in the future where the government has created a collective action where essentially they are regulating the world so much for whatever whim that they choose that we go back in time. So we no longer have electricity. We have lamps and we no longer have names. We all have numbers. We can no longer reproduce. We have to ask the government for permission to reproduce. And a lot of the self is lost. It's a great book. It's very simple read, and
it's fairly short as well,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah.
And so that helps you understand freedom just in general, and started getting you thinking about freedom and personal freedom whenever you saw in the novel that there was no freedom.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So who is an influential role model or entrepreneur that you respect?
Yeah, well, I have always been a big fan of Richard Branson. He, of course, founded the Virgin mega corporation, starting with, I believe, Virgin Records, which was a small music shop back in the, I believe, 60s or 70s. Of course, he has been really inspirational to me because he has started so many different businesses, so many different industries, and yet he's had so many failures as well, but he just keeps going. And he really provides value and is, I think, if you look at him, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how old he is, 60s, most likely. And yet he's still very innovative. He's still learning new things. He's technologically savvy. He's not afraid to jump into new things.
And he seems like he still has a lot of energy.
Yeah,
you see him, he's always spunky and like full of energy in life.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a coincidence by seeing how entrepreneurial he is and seeing how much he's built in his life. I think those two things are correlated.
Exactly.
So, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know that you've had a successful exit and sold Amagi metals, and that you're looking for new opportunities. Would you like to give out any of your contact information in case any of the listeners would like to get in touch with you?
Yeah, that would be great. Well, you can reach me on Twitter at Order of Stuff, or you can reach me at StephenMacaskill.com. On there, you can find contact information if you want to send me an email or book a speaking engagement.
Great. And we'll put the links to both of those down in the show notes. And Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, if you made it this far, thanks so much for listening to the full podcast. And don't forget to come back for next week's interview with Liberty Entrepreneurs.